Hi, and welcome to the Future of XYZ. Today is Thursday, April 22nd. It is Earth Day, and we have been celebrating Earth Day since 1970. Earth Day is now feted, if you can say that, and made for awareness in over 190 countries, and really driving increasingly towards action to take care of our very fragile planet. And joining us on Future of XYZ today to talk about the future of biomimicry, a very important topic related to the preservation of both our species, other species, and our planet, is Colin Mangham, who is based in LA. Colin, welcome to the Future of XYZ.
Hello.
Colin is an incredibly prolific professional. He is a bio-inspired brand builder, the founder or co-founder of Biomimicry LA, which is a consulting firm and educational platform. He is the CMO and sustainability lead at a company that he also founded called Morpho Energy. He is the director of the United States Green Building Council's Net Zero Accelerator in LA. He's LEED certified, has an MBA, and is a member of Living Future Institute, among many, many other things. It's a pleasure, Colin, to have you on Future of XYZ today.
And I'm a friend of Lisa's as well. So this is,
friend of Lisa's is a given, and an honor to be your friend, especially for this amazing work. And I can't wait to share with our guests and listeners, you know, what is, and we're going to start there, Colin, what is biomimicry?
Biomimicry, it's funny because if you break it down into biomimicry, it's like mimicking biology, right? So it really is as curious as the word is. It's pretty straightforward, but the idea is that we can emulate the forms, like how things are designed, the processes of how things are made, and the systems, you know, ecosystems, systems within systems, how everything interrelates and works. If we can mimic how nature does things, and by the way, we are nature, and we can come around to that, but how nature does things, then we can create tons of solutions, especially for the challenges that we've caused as human beings, as a species. But it is the emulation, it's the copying, it's the mimicry of how nature builds things, makes things, shapes things, and all that for some sort of function that really is driving how does nature propagate the species, push the DNA forward, and survive, and for humans ultimately, you know, thrive and prevail above our circumstance.
It's really not a small topic when described that way, since nature is everything around us except for some of what we've managed to create, which has largely in some ways been both advancing but also destructive. So when we think about biomimicry, I think one of the things that we're looking at is its time horizon. And I think about this a lot because I find that the modern world, and especially the Western capitalistic world, is very impatient. Right, everything is on the market side. It's on, you know, quarterly systems, but even in ourselves, and yet the history of the planet and the history of man is really, really quite tiny. Right, it's fractional. Right. So how do we think about, I mean, nature that has taken eons to be built? How can we imitate in such the timelines that fit man?
Well, the good thing is it's all around us, and in some ways it's within us, right? But it's all around us to be studied. And I'll even say it in this way. I'm a big audiophile, and I love that, for example, my kids can look back on they can look back on 5 different genres of music and piece together and mash up, you know, from all these different things. If you think about all the eons, think about it's actually, we speak to 3.8 billion years. Yep. That there's been life on Earth. You know, the planet's been here for 4.5, but for 3.8, there's been life on Earth, and we didn't come around. The people that look like me and you, anatomically similar, about 200,000 years. Whereas, yep. For example, sharks, 400 million years sharks have been around. And I'm actually a pretty big fan of sharks. I might want to tell some shark stories.
I hope we get to hear some shark stories, as long as it's not the kind where they eat people, because as someone who grew up in LA, that was always like, you know, your greatest fear, getting in the water.
So yeah, and I'm in LA, and so my greatest fear is how cold that water is going to be because everyone thinks it's supposed to be really warm and it's not. But I grab? I've got I actually who's it? Is it Marie Kondo that does say spark joy? I'm sparking all kinds of joy in this art.
Sparks of joy, Colin.
But I've got okay, actually okay. I'm just gonna bring out some stuff. But so I'm a fan of sharks, and I'm gonna show you. This is a tiger shark jaw that my grandparents brought to me when they didn't take me on the trip to Hawaii when I was young. So I guess this was a consolation prize.
I'm guessing they came back in one piece though.
They did. Some they did. And by the way, back then it was like you called them on the phone and it was like, "Hey, are you there?" Yes, we're having a great time. It was like going under the ocean. It was a while ago. But they brought this tiger shark jaw back, partly because I was when I was a kid, they called me Tiger, but that was because I was an LSU Tiger. But the things you can even learn about this, I show you these rows of teeth. If you ever seen,
oh my God,
shark jaw, you know, this is that's redundancy. That's very positive, optimized redundancy. One breaks off, one's ready to come back into place. So that's redundancy for resiliency that you can learn from something that's 400 million years old. And yeah, it's kind of sharp and jagged. But I will, you mentioned like things that eat you. Yeah, so this one, right? This is the first edition of Jaws. I've got the other one here.
Wow.
You know, it looks like this, right? This got a little scarier, right? Look at the teeth
it
difference.
Definitely did. You had to show the teeth.
Yeah. So, but I got a first edition of Jaws because part of the biomimicry stories is that Peter Benchley, who wrote this, eventually became one of the biggest advocates for shark conservation. He felt like he had really done a tremendous injustice by making the shark public enemy number one. And so he became this advocate for sharks. And I'll mention this because this was also, I just want to show this real quick because it's amazing. This is a book that I grew up with.
Yeah.
The Shark, Splendid Savage of the Sea. I found this in a book sale in Aspen, Colorado. I don't know, like 12, 15 years ago. And I was like, oh, there you go, eating things, as you see. I was like, I remember these photos. This is my favorite book growing up. And so I bought it it was like 50 cents, maybe $1. Still got the library stuff. And when I got back, I realized it was kind of flipped upside down. It was opening the wrong direction. So it was like a library second or a publisher second. And I found in there, you know, it was actually inscribed by
Does that say to John Denver?
To John Denver. You know, I was like John Denver had died in a plane crash earlier. And again, a big conservationist, and actually why I lived in Aspen for nearly 5 years and where I really got my nature thing. But that's a sign if you believe in signs, like maybe this is interesting, you know? And so since then, one of my favorite biomimicry stories is about a company called Sharklet, where a guy went out, he was looking at how ships get fouled. His name is Dr. Tony Brennan. He's working with the U.S. Department, I think, of Naval Affairs, and looking at how ships get gummed up and fouled with all kinds of organisms that creates drag on the hull, increases fuel costs, et cetera. And so how do we keep barnacles from attaching to hulls? And actually looked at shark skin and realized that sharks are like ever clean because things can't grab onto the teeth, which are basically the skin is like teeth. Have you ever petted a shark?
It's a very rough, uncomfortable feeling. Yes.
Yeah. I love that of course you've petted a shark.
It's sandpaper.
Exactly. But natural, organic, right?
Yeah. That was my first marine biology class, actually, with the USC Marine Lab, was dissecting a shark, and I'm actually very much still traumatized by it. I hadn't known that sharks gave live birth.
So maybe we should not talk about biomimicry. We should just work through this with you. No.
But that's another episode. Keep going biomimicry.
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to say the moral of the story, but let's come back to that because nature doesn't run on morals and ethics. By the way, it runs on what works, replicates strategies that work. Maybe there's something to be learned there. But this Dr. Tony Brennan figured out that how the shark skin at the micro scale, it looks like teeth, scales of teeth, and how that's all patterned and formed at the size, et cetera, is actually what keeps organisms from latching onto it. So they emulated that in a pattern very, very small, like 1/50th, 50, the size of a human hair, onto these tapes and things they could put onto bed rails and hospital doors to actually keep bacteria from having a place to grab on and propagate. So it's an
Wow.
interesting thing right now. Not necessarily viruses. So I think they're working on that as well, because that's viruses are a little different. They, they inhabit something living, whereas bacteria are living. But
But
to really,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. I want another example of that, because that's just like blows my mind that someone can look at shark skin and be like, oh, actually nothing can adhere to this, so let's use it in hospitals. So are there other
yeah.
examples of, I mean, I'm sure in biomimicry there are lots of them. So what are some other examples that you love, where we can learn and replicate nature, or emulate it, not replicate it?
Well, I guess, think about like hooky bitey stuff. I mean, the Velcro is biomimicry. It's one of our favorite examples. One that it's so prolific and you see it everywhere, but that's biomimicry. So the burdock plant has these burrs. Burrs are seed pods. If you've ever walked in the woods and had them attached to your socks or your dog, a Swiss engineer actually had that same experience. Plucked it off of his wool socks or his dog fur and looked at it and kind of studied it a bit. And from an engineering mindset, was already curious, which is a big
Yep.
thing about biomimicry. Is the future of biomimicry is curiosity. Uh, but looked at it and said, well, it has these hooks, that grab onto the fur. And what can I do with that? And that hook and loop, mechanism for attaching, the furry side of Velcro to the hooky side of Velcro, is actually where Velcro came from. And by the
Wow.
way, the name Velcro, he was a French speaking Swiss, and it comes from velour and crochet, velvet hook.
Oh, wow.
So that's what Velcro comes from.
Velcro. Amazing.
Velcro. But but I'll tell you what I love about that is not so much the how, but the why. I mean, why does that plant do that? And it's because it's a low energy or even zero energy process for it to propagate its seed. Animal brushes up against it, carries the seed out to wherever it does, and the plant's just sitting back going, all right, seeds going over there, seeds going over there, seeds going over there. And it's a seed propagation strategy. It's a strategy, zero energy, except for what it took to actually create those burrs,
Yeah.
for it to spread its seed around. And that's what all of nature is about. That's what all of us are about. We don't think about it too often. But deep down is to survive and to prevail above our circumstance. It's all, you and I are having this conversation on some deep level because I want food on my table to be able to live an X number of years. I mean, something in us, or maybe it's even just being fulfilled. Maybe there's belonging and community here.
Yep.
And that's a part of biomimicry too, is just getting out into nature and feeling, a part of it, because really we are nature. And in fact, I'll tell you this, one of our favorite things to say in the biomimicry community is, the idea of just a shift in words. And you and I have done a lot of, brand building over the years, right? And
Yep.
just the tiniest shift in how you language something, communicate something is, for example, we talk about not learning about nature, that thing over there, but learning from nature, you
Mm.
know and it's a very common thing that a lot of us in this space talk about, but it's important, because if you can think about learning from something or someone, you begin to close the gap of otherness, and again, that's a really important thing. That we need separation to create connection. We need diversity, and biodiversity to actually make the whole system work. Good messages for right now. But really the idea of just learning, from nature as a mentor, not just this thing out there. We're part of it. And if we don't realize how much we're a part of it, it's not going to continue to work on our behalf. And I've got more to say about that as well.
No, I think there's no doubt of that. I think we're definitely on this Earth Day. We can come back to the fact that we need to protect, and enhance. And I think what we've talked about a lot in this in this consciousness world, right? We're talking a lot about moving away from extraction and towards regeneration and restoration, right? I mean, this is definitely the is a non-linear linear path.
Yes, it's the circular path. And you had a brilliant one on circular economy recently, and on green roofs. And so people, if you haven't seen these other ones, please go out and
Thanks,
watch, because
Colin.
it's all interrelated. I mean, I'm watching them like, I want a campfire with these people. I mean, this is fantastic, but it's all different perspectives on the same thing. It's all, we talk about in branding, like branded house or house of brands. We're all in the same living room, It's just different doorways to get to us,
And it's really, I mean, that's also why Future of XYZ was started, was because I'm infinitely curious, right? And I do see the patterns, and I like that we're all in the same living room. It's like, and people have different patterns and skills and all the rest of it. And biomimicry is an interesting one. I want to come back to, the idea of learning, from and not just about nature, because I think about, I love being out in the, in nature, and I love being in the woods specifically, and very soon I'm going to be living in the woods a little bit more than I have been, and that's largely because I never am more in awe than when I am out in nature. And trees are a great example, I think, of what we're talking about in terms of systems. I use this a lot when I think about systems level thinking, is like, you cut down a tree over there, and what happens to the rest of the forest is, it either grows, or if you cut down the wrong thing, like, there are implications and knock-on effects. So you want to talk about that maybe as an example? I don't know if it is one for you, but.
About trees? I'll talk about trees. Well, I mean, there's some great things about trees. So if we want to go down that path, I mean, one thing is, a lot of times we'll all circle up in a biomimicry discussion in immersion, and we'll say, all right, well, what's your favorite animal? And I'll sometimes talk about the shark, and I'll talk about the tiger, but the aspen tree is one of my favorite organisms, let's say. And I love it because actually in Utah, there's one called Pando, Pando, which I don't know how many acres it is. And sorry, I'm not great with data. I'm great with maybe just the concept of it, but it's apparently the largest living organism on the planet is this grove of aspen trees. And it's one stem that's interconnected with all these other stems. And it's a lesson in resilience and redundancy, just like that shark jaw. But what I love about trees is they're rooted literally in place. And they can't move around, right? So they find ways to work with what's abundant, like sunlight or rain or whatever the temperature and humidity is going on with them. But really underground is where the whole story is going on. The wood wide web, as Susan Samard nailed it with that term. But it's this mycelial network of exchange going on, that a tree can actually get the things it needs from far away. It can communicate. Even with things like pheromones, it can warn another tree that it's getting attacked by whatever it is, and the other tree can then mount defenses for that. And that other tree's defenses might be emitting a scent of some sort to keep the predator away, or it might actually attract a certain type of wasp, let's say, and that wasp keeps the predator away. So they're all talking,
It's
it's all interrelated. It's unbelievable. It's amazing what trees actually can do. There was a poem, right? I've never seen a poem as beautiful. Anyway, I'm ruining it. Who was it, like Tennyson or somebody?
What's so fascinating about all of that, Colin, I mean, I know that there are, climate change deniers out there, and there are creationists out there in our dear land. I mean, you're from Louisiana. You certainly know that world a little bit. But I mean, the reality is, for those of us who believe in evolution, and you have someone like Darwin who talked about survival of the fittest. I mean, when we look at biomimicry, what we are talking about is it sounds to me, we're looking backwards to the things that have worked. It's like the ultimate test and learn model, right? I mean, if you believe in evolution, the things that exist today over the course of our 4.5 billion year, planetary history, they've done something right.
It's all done something right. It's taken time to do it, is part of the challenge. I like to say, actually, that if we want to say, well, actually, the future of biomimicry is actually in the past. Our future is actually in the past. And so there are things, you don't want history to repeat itself in certain ways. Let's say, I'll just drop the big one, like the Holocaust. There are things we need to learn from ourselves that we don't want to repeat. That's why you need to know history. But at the same time, there's some amazing things that have gone on. It's just, the challenge is, a lot of times it takes time. And for example, we're working on a project right now looking at bioremediation and phytoremediation, using plants to pull contaminants out of soil. And, in let's say economically disadvantaged community where we're working right now, it might take 20, 25 years for those plants to do what they need to do. So the community needs that land now.
Yeah.
you know, or sooner than 20 to 25 years. So it does take time. I also mentioned, and I got another example I want to show you, but
Another
spider
shark
silk
jaw?
is, what's that?
Another shark
No,
jaw?
actually, I'll mention this in just a second. But yeah, spider silk is stronger, has a stronger tensile strength than steel. It's stronger than steel at its size.
Yep.
That's what the tensile part is.
So it's scale, it's proportional, right? I mean,
Proportional. Yeah. So I can't make enough of that and string enough of that together to stop a plane landing on an aircraft carrier. But there's something to be emulated from that. In fact, I could take spider silk and this from the burdock plant and this from the peacock, you know, branding, but and actually make a chimera of sorts. So we can bolt together things that can work for humans. But I brought this other shark thing. This is a megalodon tooth. This is about a 45 foot shark.
that's like prehistoric shark.
Yeah, prehistoric. So this is dead, and that's my iPhone 12 Pro Max. So you get a sense of size, right?
They were in the
But
oceans when the dinosaurs were there.
they were there even when the great whites were there, and there's new articles coming out saying that the great whites contributed to the demise because they were smaller, faster, you know, and preyed upon them. But I keep this all mainly because I love sharks and because it's really cool. But because one of the things you say in biomimicry is failures are fossils.
Oh,
And then right behind that, you say, well, life replicates things that work. And can I show you one more thing?
yeah.
I don't know if you can see this back here, but this is a coulter pine cone.
Oh, I remember those growing up. My God.
This is yeah, this is from Lake Arrowhead. So
Oh,
and you can imagine I saw it on the ground and I immediately was like, you know, what
I'm glad I
squirrels like,
wasn't standing here a minute ago.
right? And there's some squirrel up there going, aha, I've got dropped this. But what I love about this, we looked to emulate this with a company called Forcia, which is a global OEM manufacturer for the automotive space. Who, by the way, they asked, you know, how would nature make a better automobile? And the answer was really, well, nature wouldn't make a better car. Nature would say, hey, just be locally rooted, be rooted in place, you know, take the things that are abundant around you. You don't need to drive all that distance or haul things in. So maybe there's a lesson there. But we looked at how maybe you could regulate the temperature of your automotive seat relative to your body temperature. How might it expand and contract? And so we looked at these guys, and this Coulter pine cone, this is probably about 10 pounds, by the way. So I'll keep holding it, even though I got my second Moderna shot yesterday. So now I've got, you know, I have my full power, but I'm holding this up for the good
Yeah,
of
it's good.
biomimicry.
It's an Earth Day miracle.
Yeah, isn't it? It's crazy. But I guess the thing to mention here is that it's all about signals and responses in nature. Nature runs on sunlight, gravity, and water, but also runs on feedback loops, communication. And for example, nature is telling us right now, hey, you know, people, this, you know, to the extent that you cause this, the things you're causing are not good for your own existence. Signal, 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 signal. You
Yep.
know, that's what climate change is. It's giving us signals to change the behavior, adapt, evolve, as biomimicry does. But this one right here changes relative to temperature and humidity changes. And what it does is when it's cold and it's wet, it actually holds that moisture in, and all these scales are pushed outward, so it closes itself up. But when it gets warmer and drier, it dries up, it pulls inward, and it can drop the seed at a time when it's warm and dry enough.
It's good conditions to survive and propagate. As you said, I think you said it's really about surviving and prevailing over our circumstances is really what nature does and what we can learn in biomimicry.
It's the mindset. The future is mainly the mindset. I'm not saying we have to all go out and say, let me look at a shark and create something, you know, that it's a better whatever this is, but at least understand that it's all interrelated. Understand that nature runs on biodiversity. Understand that there's no waste in nature. Zero waste. You know,
Yep.
one's trash is the other's treasure. It all circles. This is all circular economy. That's how all that works. But if we don't work on its behalf, there's estimated $33 trillion in economic value, if we had to pay for it, that nature does for us. Clean air, clean water, what have
Every
you.
year,
What's that?
every year, $33 trillion.
Estimated, yeah. I mean, the number's debated, but it's big,
I
right?
mean,
Imagine if the bees went away.
I was like, we could use that budget. That's a good budget.
Well, it's good that we don't have to pay for it, but in
Even
some way
better.
that bill is coming due because it can't continue. It's overstressed. It can't continue to do these services unless we give back. So we got to find ways here on Earth Day to learn from nature, create economic opportunity out of what we learn, and then be in a better position to give back to the nature we learn from.
Colin, I think that's a really nice way of wrapping up this episode of Future of Biomimicry. Thank you so much for imparting so much wisdom. It's a fascinating topic that is, I mean, beyond expansive. So I really appreciate your coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for, I guess this is like Mother Nature in residence. I'm only channeling all this stuff.
It's pulling it in.
Yeah, but thank you.
Thanks for the show and tell as well. It's fascinating. And everyone listening, go out, do something good for the planet. Think about observing how we can learn from and not just about nature, as Colin so succinctly said. And if you don't already subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, please do so to the Future of XYZ and follow us on Instagram to stay up to date. We will see you next week. Thanks.